My friends, this story has a lot of scary and interesting events, so friends who do not prefer scary stories should not listen and watch the video. Do not forget to subscribe and make a like and write a comment. Do you like this kind of stories? Let's start the story. In a small farm, there was a 13-year-old boy named Jimmy, and he was the only child for his parents. This family had a group of sheep. This child was responsible for their pastures. Every day he took them out to the forest next to the village, where grass abounded. He let his sheep graze and start carrying out his favorite hobby, which is bird hunting. Until the sun gets close to sunset, he returns home. One day, as usual, Jimmy went out with his sheep to the forest, and it was a beautiful day. The weather was sunny. It was spring and everything is beautiful and wonderful in the village, where you only see the bright colors, flowers and green of herbs, plants and trees. Jimmy was driving his sheep without paying attention to the road and didn't know that he had passed where he used to go home with his sheep. He noticed that he was far from the village. He stood up and stopped his sheep, and because the place was full of grass, he decided to let his sheep graze in the place and sat under a tree and continued to learn to play his new flute. After a few hours the sky became black with scary clouds, so Jimmy decided to go home before it rained, but it was too late and the rain started to fall in large quantities. Jimmy got confused and started looking for a place to hide with his sheep. From behind those trees, Jimmy saw a small cave, so he started directing his sheep to that cave until he completed the task and slept with his sheep in that cave. While the rain increased in strength when Jimmy entered the cave, it was dark, so he did not see the end, as his vision range did not exceed a meter from where he was standing. Jimmy gathered his 18 sheep in front of him, and he sat behind them inside the cave. The rain, lightning and thunder were terrifying outside the cave. The rain was getting stronger and the sound of terror terrified the hearts. Jimmy took the flute and began to play incomprehensible melodies due to his inability to play properly. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound, as if an iron door had opened behind him. Jimmy stopped playing to make sure of the sound. He thought that that sound was probably from the intensity of thunder and lightning outside the cave, but he heard it again and it was clearer. Jimmy said to himself, "This is an iron thing, not a lightning rod," as it came from inside the cave. Jimmy was terrified of that sound, and from what came to his mind, Jimmy pulled a small torch from the basket on his shoulder that never left him. Sometimes he comes back late from pasture and needs it to show the way. After walking a few meters he discovered that there was an entrance inside that cave, and he said to himself, "What is this cave inside a cave? Maybe I should discover it instead of sitting and waiting for the rain to stop," and he decided to enter that entrance. It was very dark, but he was able with his little torch to see the road inside that corridor. He felt a beautiful and warm breeze coming from inside, so he said to himself, "Maybe there is a second exit to this cave." Jimmy continued walking and suddenly he found himself in a magical place with trees and flowers and greenery that he had never seen like it before. He advanced a little and was amazed at the lack of rain and lightning and thunder, and said to himself, "Did the rain stop? But the ground is not wet and there is no trace of clouds, and the sky is clear blue and the weather is beautiful spring." Jimmy decided to discover the place, so he started looking for people living in the place or something that indicates its location and where it is located. So his eyes did not see this place before, but the magic of that place made him walk without feeling the time or the distance he traveled. After a short walk, Jimmy saw a large wooden house. He was very happy and went to it, perhaps finding answers to his many questions. Jimmy arrived at the wooden house and started calling. "Is there anyone?" "Sir, I am a stranger to this area and I do not know how to return to my village. Can you help me? I am hungry and I want some food." Jimmy did not hear a response. Jimmy approached the door of the wooden house and found it open, so he decided to enter. Maybe there is an old man or an old lady who did not hear him because of the weight of her hearing. After he entered, the door closed immediately, so he turned to it. He did not see who closed that door. Jimmy was terrified and felt something strange inside that house, and when he turned into the house, he found himself in front of something strange. An animal or a human. He was unaware of what was in front of him. It was a manly body but with a crocodile head and human eyes and long hair, and his legs were bull legs and his hands are huge but with two big fingers. When Jimmy saw that creature, he fainted from fear. He didn't know how long that fainting lasted, but when he woke up from his fainting, he found himself tied to a wood inside that cave, while that creature was sitting with his family, which consists of an animal similar to him, but he is smaller in size and another of the same size, but with short hair. So Jimmy realized that the one he saw first was the mother, and this is her husband and her son or daughter as she has long hair. The three creatures turned to him when they knew that he had woken up from his coma. The little creature approached him and began to smell and touch him while Jimmy froze in place from horror and fear, closing his eyes so that he would not see that creature. The short-haired creature spoke unknown words and in a terrifying voice, so the little creature moved away from Jimmy, and realized that the father had asked his daughter to stay away. Jimmy was tied hands and legs and he was tired and unable to move his body from the intensity of fatigue, fear and hunger. He had not tasted food or water in a long time. He no longer knew what day and what time it was. He was following these creatures with his eyes as he cried in silence, unaware of what was going to happen to him with this frightening family. The father got up and left the wooden house while the mother kept cutting a large amount of vegetables in a big pot, but the girl sat playing with something like a doll, combing her hair and beating her sometimes. Jimmy looked at that doll well when the little creature put it down and came out after hearing her father's voice from the outside. Jimmy realized that this toy was nothing but a little child. He was moving while lying on the ground, but why doesn't he cry or shout from those terrifying scenes? Moments later, the little creature entered carrying some wood and placing it in front of her mother, and the father entered behind her, carrying a larger amount of wood. Jimmy realized that they were preparing fire for cooking. The father put the wood under the pot while the mother started to fill the pot with water after cutting a large amount of vegetables. There was a conversation between the husband and the wife. Jimmy didn't know what that conversation was about until the father turned to him while they were standing facing him, and he realized that he was the meal they are planning to cook. So Jimmy screamed out of fear, "Oh God, save me, there is no savior for me except you," and he fainted again. Jimmy opened his eyes and found himself in the cave that he entered with his sheep. He was very happy and looked left and right, but he did not see the sheep, so he said to himself, "Maybe I slept deeply," so the sheep returned to the village. Jimmy stood exhausted and headed out of the cave. He looked at the sky. It was clear and wonderful. The rain had stopped. Jimmy tried to walk and return to his village, but he fainted again from fatigue and hunger. After a few moments, he felt something cold entering his mouth and throat. He opened his eyes. Some water. He was very happy and started crying, so his mother told him, "Don, cry and Don, be afraid, I am with you now." And she asked him, "Where were you during the 12 days I searched the village for you everywhere until we found the sheep in the cave and your father and the men of the village searched that cave and they did not find your trail, so where were you, my son?" Jimmy looked at his mother and said, "No matter where I was, the important thing is that I came back to my house and to your embrace and my father's embrace." Then he asked her, "Where is my father? Did he stop looking for me?" His mother looked at him and said, "Your father didn't leave a place without looking for you. Even inside the city he posted your pictures everywhere. Maybe someone saw you and told us about you, but last night your father decided to sleep inside that cave. Maybe he will discover something, but in the morning I found you and I did not find him in the cave." Then Jimmy cried hard and realized that his father would not come back to them again, so he said to his mother, "My mother, I want to go back to that cave so that I may find my father." So she said, "I will accompany you there." They set off with some of the men of the village to that cave, but they did not find a trace of him. The cave disappeared and no longer existed. The mother looked at Jimmy and said, "Your father sacrificed himself to save you, and he asked the monster to take him instead of you, and his request was fulfilled, so you came back and he disappeared, perhaps forever." Jimmy looked at her, hugged her tightly, and started crying. Jimmy didn't mention to anyone what happened to him that night. He knew that what happened to him was unbelievable, yet he didn't stop looking for that cave despite the passage of years, and something inside him was telling him that his father was alive and had to be found. Years passed and Jimmy grew up and got married and became a father of 3 children, and the village changed to become more civilized, and yet he did not stop searching. Here, my friends, our story ends, so I hope you like it and I hope you write your opinion about the story, and do you want a second part for it? Thank you for your precious time and to a new meeting.